You like GT350s? We've got a sweet one coming at you. 1967 saw a redesign of the Ford Mustang, and of course whenever they redesigned the Mustang, the Shelby cars kind of went along for the ride. And for 67, the direction of the Shelby GT350 car kind of changed a little bit. Instead of being a stripped down race version of a Mustang, the new 1967 cars had a little more pizzazz. The body modifications were a little more pronounced. The interior was a little more deluxe. So Ford engineers, along with Shelby, decided to make this car a little more driver-friendly because, after all, Ford realized if a car wasn't fun to drive, the buying public wouldn't buy it. And the move paid off because Ford sold 2,378 1966 Shelby GT350s, and in 1967 that number was bumped to 3,225. Now, 67 was also the first year of a second Shelby Mustang platform car, being the GT500, which was a different animal altogether. But today, we're looking at the small block powered GT350. The 67 cars were different from the earlier ones because now they were a little more refined, a little more comfortable, longer, bigger, heavier, but they still remained the raciest Mustang you could buy for 67. GT350s always looked a little bit different from the regular Mustang GTs, but they really changed a lot for 1967. It's got kind of a purposeful, aggressive look, a fiberglass hood with the scoops in it. These have a great looking cast aluminum wheel, the signature white GT350 stripes that go down the side of the car. It's got a lower and upper quarter panel scoop in the back, and the whole thing finishes off with this really slick ducktail spoiler in the rear. And the rear tail pan is different than a regular Mustang. Rather than having the thin vertical mounted taillights of a regular 67 Mustang, the Shelby has these wide units which are actually Mercury Cougar taillights but without the chrome trim surrounds. You'll also notice the round pop-off type gas cap in the center of that panel. The grille and lower valance made the whole nose of the car look unique, and the Shelby GT350s also had a pair of driving lights mounted in the grille. And you'll see two different versions of these if you study these cars. There were some that had narrow mounted driving lights, as in this car. Others had them pushed out a little bit further towards the outside that resembled the high beams of the 4-light 69 cars. The difference between the two was merely to satisfy regulations of different states, which dictated where you could put those lights. There were several different wheel options available. Believe it or not, the stock Shelby wheel was a steel wheel with a hubcap. Then you could get a styled steel wheel, but many people popped for the aluminum 10-spoke 15 by 7-inch wheel we see on this car. All the Shelby Mustangs had that triple stripe going down the lower side of the car, and then a designation if it was going to be the GT350 or the GT500. And a series of emblems in the grille and on the fenders and the rear deck told people that this was, in fact, a Shelby and not just a Mustang. Inside the car we find a deluxe Mustang interior, which is a little more comfortable and more luxuriously appointed than the stripped-down GT350s of 1965 and 1966. These cars now featured a 140 mile-an-hour speedometer and an 8,000 RPM tach, and additional Stewart Warner gauges were mounted under the dash to make sure the driver was aware of oil pressure and the charging amperage of the electrical system. These cars had a fold-down rear seat, and either a 2 or a 4-point roll bar was installed as part of the GT350 package. Our car is wearing a very cool 60s green shade, code number 7, and the stripes are in kind of a cream color, and Shelby buyers could have sprung for a $39 option to have a pair of rally stripes that went over the top of the car from the hood all the way to the rear deck. But Shelby cars were all about performance, and the GT350 continued to deliver on that front. They carried over the 289 cubic inch, 306 horsepower K-Code V8. Now the K-Code was normally rated at 271 horsepower, but thanks to some Shelby improvements, namely a high-rise aluminum intake manifold and a 715 CFM carburetor, when applied with the 4-speed manual transmission that raised that horsepower rating up to 306. There were automatic transmissions available on these cars as well. And that 289 had a lot of other high-performance things inside. It was a fairly high compression engine, solid lifter, camshaft. Even the water pump and the pulleys were unique to stay stable at high RPM without throwing the belts. It had a beefed up bottom end and good cylinder heads. Of course, a high-performance free-flowing exhaust that went all the way back and exited in either a pair of 3-inch round exhaust tips or a quad tip, depending on at what part of the calendar year the car was built. Driving performance was enhanced on the GT350s through the use of special spring rates. They were damped with performance Coney shocks. They had special front and rear sway bars, a good rear spring, and a traction lock rear axle, so that your Shelby would have been a good performer on a drag strip or a road course. The 67 GT350 was really a hot car. Of course, that's the same year that Shelby introduced the GT500, which was powered by the big block 428 cubic inch V8. And a lot of people think that 67 was also the first year that Shelby kind of deviated from the plan of making a race version for the street. And purists will say that the earlier cars are cooler because they are more racy than the more luxury-minded 67 cars. But at any rate, we really dig this car, and we're glad we got to spend some time with it in the Brothers collection. About 1,100 people peeled off the $4,000 it took to bring home a brand new 67 Shelby. $4,000, could you imagine? If you could go back, what car would you buy? Share your stories with us on our website at MuscleCarOfTheWeek.com. We've got a forum there. You can tell us what car you would have bought or maybe what car you did buy. But until we invent a time machine to do that, you can come back each week to MuscleCarOfTheWeek.com and see a different car from the Brothers collection. We like that one? Holy mackerel.